Bloodborne, originally released in March of 2015. Currently retailing for $19.99 or $34.99 for the complete edition, including the DLC. Bloodborne is only available on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. What we have here is a Souls-like game. But instead of a medieval dark fantasy, we instead have a Victorian setting with heavy Lovecraftian themes. You play as a person who has come to Yharnam to find a cure for an unnamed disease, because Yharnam is famous for its blood transfusions that seem to cure all ailments. However, you find out, after receiving your blood, that there are side effects to deal with. Where this blood comes from, and why it seems to affect various people differently, is never fully explained, as being a Souls-like game, there is no direct storytelling here. Just little bits and pieces that you can get off of NPC dialogue and item descriptions. But it does seem that enough blood being used will cause mutations. Early on, you see people slowly turning into wolf-like creatures, where in an older part of the city you see more simian-looking creatures. The woods find some more reptilian-looking creatures. Around Bergenworth, you see things that resemble insects more closely. Why the blood seems to cause such varied mutations is unclear. It's possible that there's more than one source for the blood. You do see many creatures that could be called cosmic whores, but cosmic whore is not the only Lovecraft connection. This game finds you going into dreams at several points, and if you pay attention, you'll notice that all of these dreams you go into are connected. You also find out that it's possible to be dead in the real world while still existing in the dreams. These ideas come directly from H.P. Lovecraft's dream cycle stories, which are not as well known as his cosmic horror work. But it is not just setting that is different in Bloodborne. It plays very differently from other Souls games. Bloodborne does not want you to defend. Instead, it wants you to evade and attack. In fact, if you are hit, you have a small grace period to attack back and regain most of the health you just lost. This game awards aggression, and playing defensively will lead you to failure every time. In fact, it could be argued that the armor in this game is purely cosmetic. Yes, all the armor does have various defensive stats, but none of them are really high enough to make much of a difference. So personally, I like to play with a top hat on. It makes me feel classy. The number of weapons is relatively small compared to other Souls games. However, each weapon has 2 modes that you can switch between freely and do combos with. In most of the footage, I'm using an axe, but it can be switched between a large 2-handed axe or a small 1-handed axe. And with weapons, it's not just about the size of the weapon. Switching between modes on most weapons will have 2 different kinds of damage, and the vast majority of weapons are only wielded in one hand. You might think that's for a shield, and you'd be wrong because you're thinking defensively. Your other hand will usually have a gun in it. Your gun is how you do parries in this game, though there are options other than firearms. Torches, for example, various other gadgets. And while you may think that it's a weakness to not have more weapons in the game, having 2 modes for each weapon makes each far more versatile than you would usually expect. In addition to the setting and equipment being quite different than other Souls games, there's a feature unique to Bloodborne in the form of chalice dungeons. In your hub world, the Hunter's Dream, there are tombstones. You can place a chalice in front of them, sometimes with various other items, to go into a dungeon, a few of which are fixed, but most of which are generated procedurally, and there are interesting and unique things to find in these dungeons. And they are also a great place to grind up blood echoes, what this game calls souls, as going through areas over and over again can get quite boring. And yes, a lot of these dungeons are very similar looking, but at least their layouts and enemy placements are new when you go to them. And in fact, if you're looking for a challenge, these get far harder than anything else in the base game. Overall, I consider this to be the easiest of From Software's Souls games. And as long as you keep an aggressive mindset, that will probably be the case for you as well. And when I say that, I am mostly talking about the base game. The Old Hunters DLC really takes the gloves off and is far harder than the base game. Which does make sense, but know that you can access it fairly early in the game, but you probably don't want to. So, is Bloodborne worth your time and money? So long as you have a PlayStation 4 or 5, absolutely yes. In my opinion, it is the best of the PlayStation exclusives. However, I would not recommend that you buy a PlayStation for the sole purpose of playing Bloodborne. This does take my number 2 spot in my rankings of the Souls games. It would possibly take the number 1 slot if it was available on more platforms. But as is, it's right between Dark Souls 3 at number 3, and of course, the original Dark Souls, which we will talk about later. Oh, and for all the people that say this isn't truly Lovecraftian because you actually can fight and defeat the various cosmic horrors, I do want to point out that they are beaten in several Lovecraftian stories. The Dunwich Horror comes immediately to mind, and I mean really, all it took was a boat propeller to stop Cthulhu in that one story. So clearly they aren't quite as all-powerful as they might be billed at. Please do subscribe, comment, like, and tell your friends.